This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. I wonder if you guys stayed up late like I did on Thursday to watch the Wild fall apart. We'll talk about that very soon. We got a lot of other stuff coming up on the show. Greg Larson wrote a book about the life of a minor league clubhouse attendant. He's from Elk River, spent a couple of years in the low Class A system with Baltimore as a clubhouse attendant there. Had some great stories that he put in his book. So we'll talk to him in just a little bit. It was a fun interview. I really enjoyed talking to him and getting to know him a little bit more and getting to know more about his book. We'll also talk a little bit more about the Twins here in a bit. But first, the big one, what did I miss? Like I said at the outset, Wild game kind of went late, past 11, past everybody's bedtime, some of you at least. Wow. Where to start with that game? There's so much to unpack. I wrote down so many notes that I have to get to here that I'm eager to get to it, even if the game was unpleasant. 5-2, Vegas is your final. Wild jump out to a 2-0 lead early. Kirill Kaprizov sets up Ryan Hartman for a beautiful early goal, backdoor pass essentially. Tap in. It was everything's going well. Joel Eriksson Ek scores not too long after that on a rebound on a shot knocked down 2-0 now, and then looks like the Wild's going to go up 3-0. Ek scores again on a rebound, but goal disallowed because earlier in the shift Nick Bukestad had entered the zone off sides. Goal comes off the board. 3-0 becomes 2-0. You're like, uh-oh. Momentum right there. You're wondering what's going to happen. So I actually thought the Wild finished off the rest of that period in good shape. That while they didn't really, the play got a little bit more even at that point, but they still, the thing they wanted to guard against at that point was giving one back and feeling like you completely dominated a period, but we're going into the intermission at 2-1. So they got in at 2-0. You're like, okay, 2-0 is a very solid lead. They played a great period, dominated a lot of possession. Strangely enough, Vegas had 2 power plays in that period. Wild only had 1. That was the officiating quibble I had in that game was the first period when one team is dominating the play so much and the other team gets 2 power plays to your 1. That was strange to me. But here's the thing: the game totally changes in the final 40 minutes. If you're going to divvy up the blame, if you're going to talk about officiating this, officiating that, it's 5% officiating and 95% the Wild completely falling apart in that game to the point that, Vegas just completely outshoots them the rest of the way. 40-16 for the game. Gets 3 goals in the second period, just a complete onslaught. And the Wild, basically lets them off the hook, right? The goal, the disallowed goal kind of becomes a turning point, even if the momentum didn't 100% shift at that point, because 3-0 is such a different lead than 2-0 in any low-scoring sport, but especially hockey. You talk about the quote-unquote dreaded 2-goal lead. Well, it was that in this game. Ryan Hartman, who scored that first goal for the Wild, pretty much summed it up perfectly after the game. Let's play a clip of his post-game availability right now.
We left Cam out to dry a little bit there. Or a lot of it. We gave them everything. We had no possession, no work ethic, no battle. We got away from our game and we let them dictate. But like I said, we gave them everything there.
That's it, right? They didn't support Cam Talbot at all. They fell apart. They stopped doing the things that had been successful early on, which is a lot of good cycling down low. Smart plays in your zone, smart plays in the opponent zone. Just they were playing their game 100%, and it completely shifted. Now, a lot of that has to do with Vegas, because the short answer for how this happened is probably the least pleasant truth that you want to hear. It's that Vegas is a better team and has more playoff experience together. And I know the Wild played Vegas well in the regular season and has played Vegas well at XL Energy Center pretty much since the inception of Vegas coming into this league. But this is the playoffs. I get that the building matters sometimes. I get that history matters. I get that when you jump out to a 2-0 lead, you're thinking, okay, this is the Wild team that we've seen against Vegas, but you know what? The playoffs are totally different. So Vegas is the better team. They were the higher seed. They were right in contention. Them and Colorado are probably the 2 best teams in the league. Okay, so that's the reality of life in the West right now. This is how the West was won. This is how the West was lost. Wild, the third best team in the West Division this season, and I don't think there's any question about that going in. So you got a better team. They come out with a jump in the second period, and it's just kind of off to the races. They score 3 times in that period. The Wild can't do anything to stop the bleeding. Can't at least get to the third period tied. I think if they get to the third period at least tied, it's a different game. But when you go into the third period 3-2 like that, then you're just then you're desperate. I think there was a desperation to their game that showed up in not the best way in that game. I think it showed up in people trying to do too much, in not doing the smart things anymore. Just pretty much after those first 2 goals. And then the disallowed goal, they got very few good looks until really the final minute and a half, when Vegas had already gone up 4-2, and the Wild pulled for an extra attacker, had a couple kind of half chances that were rolling around by the net, almost went in. Not necessarily grade A shots, but at least throwing pucks to the net, getting pucks through. Everything else before that was such on the perimeter. And Vegas, again, Vegas has something to do with that. They're a team that knows what they want to do. They're a team that knows how to limit you when they've got the lead, when they've got their game rolling. So I think frustration for sure creeping in with the Wild at that point. But the bottom line of this game is the Wild completely lets Vegas off the hook. Choke is a strong word. I saw that used a little bit on social media on Thursday night. But when you get up 2-0 early, when you've got all the momentum going, and you can't at least sustain some semblance of that for any other part of the game, that's a tough one to swallow. That's not the way you want to play a home playoff game when you have such an opportunity, where you've stolen one on the road, you've played 2 really good road games, and you come out completely on fire in Game 3, and then it just completely goes downhill from there. So a couple other prevailing thoughts from this game. One, I talked a lot and written a lot going into this game about how the Wild, this is starting to feel a little bit too familiar, like they weren't able to score in these big moments, that their high-end players weren't doing what they needed to do. For 10 minutes, I was completely ready to eat my words, right? They looked like the offense was a completely different story, like they were going to get everything going. But in the end, they get 2 goals, they get 16 shots. Offense is still a problem right now. They absolutely need more from their top players. I know Kirill Kaprizov, he had that beautiful assist on that first goal. Just a wonderful touch to envision to get that through to Hartman for what seemed like a very important goal at the time. But you know what? Kaprizov wasn't very good the rest of the game. He was a -3 for the game, you guys. That means he was on the ice for 4 of the Vegas 5 goals. That's not good. You don't want to see that. Kevin Fiala, he's a -3 in that game as well, and he still has no points in this series. And honestly, I think the Eck, Foligno, Greenway line was their best line. I don't think it was out there enough, to be honest. I think Dean Evason, for as many of the correct buttons as he's pushed this season, didn't really push the right buttons last night. I think he was kind of relying a little bit too much on the high end, the high end skill guys, and not leaning into the Foligno, Greenway, Eck line as much as maybe he could have. So again, easy to second guess after a loss like this. A lot to nitpick at, but I just don't think they're getting enough from their top guys. And maybe that's an experience. Maybe, like I said, Vegas has something to do with that, because Vegas is paying very close attention to Kaprizov in particular, and Fiala also. Fiala was really good in Game 2. So we're not going to say he's not played well at all. And I think Kaprizov's had his moments too, but these are the playoffs. These things get magnified. Like Nick Bonino said earlier in the week on this podcast, in the playoffs, everything is magnified. Everything's a small sample size, and when you're not producing, it stands out. Last thing, speaking of pushing the right buttons, Marcus Johansson, who had not been good in this series the first 2 games, gets hurt early in Game 3. Dean Evason says doesn't look good, doesn't give specifics. I'm sure we'll get an update on that at some point, but would be surprising if he was available for Game 4. That leaves you with a very interesting decision. Do you go with the past or do you go with the future when altering your lineup? Zach Parise has been a healthy scratch these last 3 games now, but he is one of your all-time leading, playoff players. He's got 77 career playoff points in 101 games. He was your leading goal scorer last year. He was your leading goal scorer 2 years ago. His game has fallen off, and he's fallen in the esteem of the coaches and management in this staff. Does he get subbed into this lineup now? Does he slide into that third line perhaps where Johansson was? Because I don't know if you want to disrupt what you've got going on the fourth line, which has been by and large pretty good with Nick Bukestad, Nick Bonino, and Nico Sturm. So there's that. There's that aspect of it. Does Parise come in, or do you elevate the rookie Matt Boldy from the taxi squad and have him make his debut in the playoffs? It's not unheard of in the NHL. It's not even unheard of in sports here, because we saw Alex Kirilloff do the same thing for the Twins in the playoffs against the Astros in 2020. Man, that feels like forever ago, doesn't it, that the Twins were in the playoffs? That was only 7-8 months ago, but that does feel like a long time ago given where they're at right now. But past versus the future, it'll be an interesting decision. I think it's probably not all that complicated, because it seems like Zach Parise would be the natural call in that situation, but you never know. I'll be interested to see what happens and how the lineup gets a jolt, because this lineup certainly needs a jolt. You don't want to see it happen because of injury, but maybe whoever comes into that situation can provide them a spark that they're going to need in Game 4. Because tell you what, if they lose that one, even if they win that one, they're out there in an uphill climb. If they lose that one, I don't like their chances in Game 5 Monday, and this could be a short series instead of what we thought was going to be a long one.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Joined today on Daily Delivery by Greg Larson. Grew up in Elk River, local author, has a book that came out in early April called Clubbie, a minor league baseball memoir. Greg, welcome to Daily Delivery, and you should know right off the jump, I'm a huge minor league baseball fan, so I'm looking forward to reading the book in full. I've read parts of it now, but congrats on the book, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just at the jump, what prompted you to write this book, and maybe give me your backstory in terms of how you came to work in minor league baseball as a clubbie, and maybe even just explain for someone who might not be privy to this, what is a clubbie exactly?
Yeah, a clubbie is a term of affection for a clubhouse attendant or clubhouse manager in minor league baseball or major league baseball. I was a clubbie for a single A affiliate for the Baltimore Orioles for 2 seasons. I grew up loving the Twins. Growing up in Elk River, I fell in love with the game through the contraction kids in the early 2000s fighting for their lives successfully, unlike the Montreal Expos who were contracted. That's how I fell in love with the game, and I just always wanted to be a player. I wanted to just be around the game. And after I graduated college, my only job experience was working in a clubhouse for my college baseball team. I was the clubbie for them for 1 season. So the only job experience I had as a recent college graduate was washing jock straps and feeding the team. So I just I thought, you know what? It's 2011. I could do worse than to work in professional baseball. Happened to find a job in the Orioles organization, got into that world, and it just completely transformed my perception of myself and the game of baseball for better and for worse in some ways.
So what does a clubhouse attendant do, and how does that provide, I would imagine, is fascinating, rich source material for a minor league baseball memoir?
Yeah, a clubhouse attendant is basically in charge of anything that goes in and out of the clubhouse. I mean, mainly laundry, cleaning up garbage, washing the toilets. But the only thing that anybody cares about in a minor league clubhouse, maybe in a major league clubhouse too, is the food before and after the game. That was the biggest duty that I had to take care of. And for me, I was running scams with the stadium VIP level so that I'd slip the people in the kitchen a few bucks. And then after the game, they would give me all of their leftovers and I would feed it to the team and get their dues money and tips on top of it. So, I mean, I was just, in some ways, I was kind of fighting for my life the same way some of the players were, just trying to move up the organizational ladder. So I saw our coaching staff, their dynamics. I saw our players' dynamics, and I also got a sneak peek into some of the visiting clubhouse dynamics as well. Is a strange world in there.
So explain to me the economics of being a clubby, because it seems like you're not just straight up paid like an hourly wage. It's almost like a hustle. And I imagine at a single A level, these guys don't have a ton of money. Obviously, there's some guys, they're drafted, they got bonuses, so they've got something. But some of these guys might be like 28th round draft picks, and they're making $800 a month. So how does the money work out? What's the cash out for you? What's the cash in for you?
It is a really weird dynamic that is fortunately changing this year. But in general, players at that level, short season single A, which no longer exists, the New York Penn League that I was in also no longer exists, but guys were making about $1,200 a month. I would charge them $7 a day in dues, which was ostensibly to cover pregame spread, postgame spread, and laundry, which in itself is strange that it's the player's obligation to pay for their laundry being done and to pay for food when they have to be at the stadium. It's strange. Fortunately, Major League Baseball has abolished that dues system in minor league baseball. And so in the end of the day, my job was to pay to feed the team, and anything off the top I was taking as a profit. So I would do anything I could to try and do leftovers, to try and do stadium hot dogs, all that. I was making about triple what the players were making approximately, which is strange for the guy who's washing their clothes.
That's crazy. So you kind of like as many corners as you can cut, or however you can make it work. That's how you make it work. But you're also probably working every single day. Do you go on? Are you just home games, or you travel too, or how does that work?
I was only a home clubby, okay, but I would travel a few times every season just because I wanted to experience that life. And I got to kind of pretend when I travel with the team. I would put on a jersey. I would take batting practice. I'd go shag fly balls. And those moments are really the moments that I cherish the most from those 2 seasons. And those are the moments where I really got to come full circle in a way in the book, where I had these dreams of growing up to be a light hitting second baseman for the Minnesota Twins. I wanted to be Luis Rivas back in the early 2000s. That's who I thought I could be, because I couldn't hit at all. I wasn't real great defensively either, but we'll just kind of brush that aside. But I thought that I could have a chance one day. And I had my half Rudy moment when I was traveling with the team on the road. But it turned out that I realized that it was very obvious that I was not a good enough baseball player to do anything other than be a clubhouse attendant.
So when did you decide to, I want to get into some of the stories from the book in a moment, but I'm curious, when did you say, I think I've got enough here that this could be an interesting book? When did it become an idea for, more than just a past experience, but a memoir?
Early on, my first season that I was with the Iron Birds, I started keeping track of conversations, and I started keeping track of things. I had no idea what the story was going to be. I just knew that all of these dynamics that were going on of me wanting to be a player and these guys not getting paid very much would make an interesting story. And it wasn't until I finished those 2 seasons, I had about 285 pages of notes. And then I went into a graduate creative writing program the next year, and I started writing the first draft of the book. And it's weird. Like the first time I tried writing the book, it was an expose. I wanted to show the world what minor league baseball was really like. And then shortly thereafter, I had decided that it was going to be a memoir, because that was far more interesting than just trying to be a journalist. I'm not objective about anything.
Sure. So it's not like so it's not like just it's not the dirt or anything like that. But I imagine there are some good, some good stories that work their way into it. I think before we started, you mentioned something about Dave Roberts being there on a rehab assignment. What does it mean when someone who's, an established player comes down and all of a sudden, he's kind of the god, right? I would think.
In a lot of ways. Brian Roberts.
Brian Roberts, my fault. Yeah, not Dave Roberts. What am I thinking? Yeah, you're not that old. Brian Roberts. Brian Roberts, my bad.
Yeah, Brian Roberts, all-star second baseman for the Orioles, that 2012 season. It is a big deal. But the thing that guys in a minor league baseball clubhouse care about the most is the fact that it's customary for a major leaguer who's doing a rehab stint to buy the post-game spread for the team as a thank you for letting him use the game as a workout. So Brian Roberts was coming off of an oblique injury, and he was going to do a 2-game stint with the Iron Birds first game, he looked completely overmatched against 19-year-olds. He just was very obviously still injured. But he had shown up too late to the game to give me his credit card to go get the post-game spread. So after the game, he comes up. He's like, hey, man, sorry I missed the post-game spread today. I want to get it for the team tomorrow. Here's my credit card. What's the best restaurant in town? I was like, Applebee's is the best we got in Aberdeen, Maryland. So then, no exaggeration, the entire next day, all anybody cares about, they don't care about what happened on the field. All they care about is what's the post-game spread going to be that Roberts is going to get us. And that's the whole talk of the clubhouse. Well, it's a couple hours before game time. Brian Roberts still hasn't shown up. I haven't made the purchase of the food yet because he's not there. And we're all watching ESPN, and we see a press conference with Orioles manager Buck Showalter and Brian Roberts saying his rehab game last night in Aberdeen went so poorly. We're shutting him down for the season. His season is completely over. And all of us, we're just sitting there watching it. And I'm sure everyone in Orioles Nation was like, oh, man, there goes our all-star second baseman. And all of us in the clubhouse were like, oh, man, there goes our post-game spread. Like, those are the only things that we care about in that clubhouse. So we had to get the regular crappy leftovers that night instead of the nice Applebee's.
I love that Applebee's was the pinnacle too. I mean, no offense to Applebee's. It is a solid restaurant, but it's funny that was this was going to be your moment to get Applebee's after the game, and it was, and that dream was crushed. So you normally why are they so focused on food? Why is that such a big thing? Is it just because they're always hungry? Is it just a life in the minors? What's the fascination with food?
It's a lot of things. That is an interesting question. One, it's a bunch of hungry young men,
sure,
first of all, who are being athletes. That's the easy answer. But I think more importantly, it's just so many things in baseball are monotonous and the same every single day that when you have a little treats like a change of pace with food, it means a lot. And guys just they're deprived in so many ways in a minor league clubhouse that any little creature comfort just means the world to them. So a new type of food or something different for the spread it's a big deal. It's like snack time. I did feel like I was a kindergarten teacher or a team mom sometimes cutting up orange slices for these guys, trying to change it up for snack time for them. I think that's why it's so important.
That's funny. Who else did you interact with in your 2 years there that stood out as either memorable characters or in particular that just people who stood out to you and that you still remember now?
Oh yeah, Alan Mills, our pitching coach, those 2 seasons. In short season single A level like that, there's a lot of turnover, not just players but in the staff as well. And Alan Mills and I were, I think, 2 of the only staff members that stayed around for those 2 seasons. Alan Mills, 12 years in the major leagues. He once knocked out Darryl Strawberry in a brawl between the Orioles and Yankees in 1998. Mills was a part of an early 2000s LA Dodgers bullpen that fought some fans at Wrigley Field in right field foul territory. Alan Mills he's a lot of things, but one of those things is he's a brawler. And, he's a somewhat intimidating guy. And I was so green that I had no idea what I was doing. And in some ways, he took me under his wing like he did a lot of his pitchers. And he told me, hey, man, this world is going to eat you up. You have to toughen up if you want to survive here. And so he would have these conversations with me where he'd coach me to be a better clubby. And then eventually he was the person who was throwing me batting practice at the end of my second season and showing me like, hey, man, you really do belong here in a lot of ways, but you also don't belong here in some very important skill-based ways.
That's funny. So take me through the writing process. We got a couple more things I want to ask you. The writing process where you say the first draft, right, is more, you're thinking it's going to be kind of an expose or, a tell-all book about your 2 seasons there. And then it becomes, like you say, a memoir. What then did the book become for someone who's interested in reading this book?
It became a story about a young man growing up in a game that tries to keep us all young. It's a lot of baseball. It's very inside baseball. But baseball to me is just the backdrop to explore something deeper. And that something deeper is what it's like to love a game that maybe doesn't care about you very much anymore. What it's like to love another person when you have a hard time loving yourself. And all of those things are exemplified in my relationships with the game of baseball, in my relationship with my girlfriend in those 2 seasons. Because, I mean, there's a lot of stories that I did not want to tell, stories about me struggling to keep my relationship alive as I was just getting sucked more and more into the baseball world, struggles that a lot of players have as well. I didn't want to tell those stories, but I realized that in order to show this world as completely as possible, I had to show it in all of its beauty and all of its unsavory aspects as well. And I think that's what this book is.
Did you ever, when you're at that level as a clubbie, are you hoping to become a major league clubbie at that point? I just don't know what the kind of the chain of command is, or how you work your way up at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of my dream. In the back, I think unconsciously, I wanted to work my way up because I wanted to work my way up as a player myself, is
Sure.
what I was thinking. I never would have admitted that to myself. But yeah, my goal was to go down into the Orioles clubhouse. One rehab stint, we had a pitcher doing a rehab stint, so I had to go down to the Orioles clubhouse to pick up some Major League Baseballs. And I got to see the beautiful mahogany lockers, and they have these CEO chairs at every locker, and they weren't fighting in our locker room, it was always a fight of who has enough fold up metal chairs. Somebody's always doubled up on the locker, somebody doesn't have a chair. And I just saw all of the amenities, and I thought to myself, man, I want to work in this world. And so I did have that idea of moving up the ladder. But after my second season, I thought, you know what? I don't think this is the right path for me. I think I'm an author instead.
And here you are with the Clubbie minor league memoir, minor league baseball memoir. Where can we get this book, Greg?
It's available anywhere books are sold. Preferably, I'd like you to go through my website, clubbiebook.com. That's CLUBBIE book.com. And you can buy signed, personalized autograph copies there.
Awesome. Greg, I really enjoyed this. Appreciate you being on Daily Delivery. And good luck with the book and any future writing endeavors, all right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed that conversation with Greg Larson. Go buy that book if you are interested. And like I said, I'm a huge minor league baseball fan. I take a trip almost every year. Last year was the first one we had missed in 20 years with a group of friends. We call it the Great Baseball Road Trip. And a lot of times we have incorporated minor league baseball, especially in recent years, because it's just more fun a lot of times than the major leagues. The characters, the atmosphere at the ballparks. So fun to hear some stories about minor league baseball from Greg Larson, and I'm looking forward to reading the book even more in depth than what I was able to do before that interview. Let's end with the cooler. Speaking of baseball, weird to think this given how most of his season is gone, but where would the Twins be right now without Miguel Sano in the last week? They are 3-4 in their last 7 games since May 15th. That's only 6 days ago. The 3 wins they've had are directly as a result of Miguel Sano, and that's not an understatement. The 3-run home run he hit against Oakland in the 8th inning to give them a 5-4 win. The 3 home runs he hit 3 days later against the White Sox to tie that game, and he'll help them get it in the 9th inning. And then doubleheader game 2 against the Angels. They'd already lost 7-1, trying for the 13th time this season to win a game that didn't go a full 9 innings. They were 0-5 in 7-inning games as part of doubleheaders, and 0-7 in extra inning games up to that point. Miguel Sano hits a grand slam in the first inning. They win that game 6-3, finally break through. And again, not having a great season, but all of a sudden now his OPS is .730. It is above the league average at the very least. His slugging percentage .418, also above the league average. So you want more out of your first baseman. You want more out of Miguel Sano specifically, but he has been on a tear. I don't think there's anywhere else to put it. 5 home runs in a week, in 3 games that he has directly impacted, and it's just a shame that it's kind of in this moment now where so much has happened already that's hard to imagine it mattering that much. But hey, better to have it than to not have it at the very least. That'll do it for today. That'll do it for the week. Hope you enjoyed everything we did this week, including the bonus podcast. If you missed that, we did a bonus Twins podcast on Thursday. Circle back and check that out. A special delivery with Lavelle E. Neal III and Jim Suhan. Be back at it Monday. Patrick Royce should be on the show. I got to have Adrian Heath Loon's manager, on a show next week as well, plus plenty of other good stuff coming up. Enjoy your weekend. Listen to anything you missed, and I'll catch you again on Monday.